We like the idea sometimes of other people liking who we are. So, how do you work with couples with this who even struggle to accept themselves?
We're all provided with experiences where we are sometimes forced, but it's a more obvious and blatant choice in front of us where we can choose to stake a claim about our life or we can choose to not. And those can happen a lot, but it can be hard to choose to stake a claim and to be more open and transparent about who you are to other people. I think there's a lot of courage in taking the risk and moving out of comfort, because maybe comfort is more illusionary than we think.
Welcome to Differentiated Love and Sex. I'm Catherine Roebuck. I'm a relationship coach, and I work with couples and individuals on growing closer to each other while being true to themselves.
I'm Jackie Aston. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and relationship coach with over a decade of experience helping individuals and couples strengthen their relationships and improve their mental health. And today we have with us Todd, who's also a licensed therapist. Todd Bean is a certified social worker and couples therapist in Lehigh, Utah. After previously working in the tech space, doing recruiting and operations for over 5 years, Todd decided he wanted to spend his time doing something more rewarding and impactful, ultimately shifting his focus to relational work and couples therapy. So Todd works with individuals and couples of all different backgrounds and orientations to recognize patterns in their lives that are occurring and getting in the way of their relationship. And it sounds like, Todd, when you are not doing that work, you enjoy playing pickleball, tennis, volleyball, and watching Survivor with your partner, Bill.
That's correct.
Hey, well, so today our topic with you, Todd, is about authenticity and really how we can be more of our true selves, bring that to our relationships, show up more as ourselves. I know that's really important to you. This is also a struggle for many of us because authenticity comes with risk of rejection and anxiety about judgment. So we're glad that you're here and willing to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here, Todd. And I was wanting to jump in with just what's the connection you see between authenticity and differentiation?
Ooh, for me, I think they play on each other in sometimes really difficult ways. If someone is trying to become more differentiated, then inherently they will need to come to terms with who they are and what they want. And sometimes it can be difficult to accept those things, especially when those things could be at odds with what other people think or feel.
Absolutely. I think the first part is, can we handle who we are? Can we be okay with that? You know, we like the idea sometimes of other people liking who we are. So how do you work with couples with this who even struggle to accept themselves?
Yes, it's a common theme I see in almost every couple where one or both of the partners um, is trying to get some validation and approval from the other, where they, at the core, seem to be a little uncertain and unsettled about who they are or what they want. Maybe because of previous experiences in their lives, how they were raised in their family, or various other background. People are kind of conditioned to present themselves a certain way or to do certain things to get those good feelings of validation from someone else. And typically that's found, in that couple relationship. So one person is trying to get that validation by acting or behaving in a certain way.
So there can be a lot of pressure in the relationship of, I want your approval so much that it actually interferes with me showing up as who I really am.
Yes, absolutely. And oftentimes it'll go a little further where people will sometimes sacrifice quite a bit about themselves to stay in a relationship or to keep a relationship stable. So they will be the person that they feel like the other person wants them to be. They will act a certain way. They will forego their own desires, their own wants, their own opinions to kind of keep equilibrium, to keep the peace is a lot of what I hear, which isn't really peaceful. It's more just a lot of sacrifice of oneself.
Why is that a problem? With couples, if, one partner says, you know what, you like it when I am the one who takes charge all the time and I make the decisions. So I'm going to do that. But actually, that's not something I always want to do, or it's been a burden to me. There might be hiding that they're really thinking that they don't want the relationship to stay in that dynamic. Why is that a problem? Because on one hand, they're getting a lot of praise and validation from it. Is keeping the relationship stable, meaning no one's arguing. Why? What do you think?
I think that equilibrium or that kind of static phase in a relationship can can go on for some time, maybe a couple years, but eventually the cracks in a relationship naturally begin to show, mostly because life happens and it's hard to keep up a facade for a really long time. And I think that um, it can feel really good to kind of keep things as they are as opposed to move away from or try something new within a relationship, whether that's an emotional dynamic or a sexual dynamic. Um, it can, there's a lot of safety in keeping things a lot of the same.
So, what do you find tends to push people out of their comfort zone on this and make it worthwhile to take that risk?
Well, some of the things I see is that people, one partner or another, but typically it's just one, they'll get tired of this dynamic that has happened. In some cases, right, the female in the relationship will get tired of the way that she feels she has to act or that she has to put up with certain things, and she's kind of just tired of it. And that can begin to build into resentment or, active hostility against their partner. And and so they're kind of reaching a breaking point, and that's when sometimes people come to see me and they're wanting to find help. And typically that starts with like, well, how can we communicate our way through this, which doesn't really work as well. But that's typically when I see people is at that crisis point where someone just doesn't want to do this anymore.
We're talking about dynamics and being authentic about what you really think. That's one way of being more differentiated, letting someone know what you really want, what you think. Um, there's a whole other experience of really sharing who you are. So, what are your real beliefs about religion? What are your real desires in sex? What are you interested in your life? What are you interested in that it actually might be hard to share that. Your partner doesn't feel the same way. They don't have the same interests as you. They aren't into the same sexual things that you might be interested in. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's one thing to maybe not agree with someone's, political stance or stuff like that, but to actively disagree about something that you don't see eye to eye about, it can be hard to bridge that gap.
I was just thinking more about showing up as who you really are. So we were talking about how sharing your mind, like, I don't want to keep this dynamic going of doing all the laundry. And right now I've been doing it because you've been praising me. Like, that was one thing we were talking about. The thing that I'm talking about is showing up who you are. And so that's different. So what if your religious beliefs really have changed and it's different than your partner? People will hide that from each other to keep the peace. And what if your sexuality is, or your sexual interests are different than your partner, and you're worried that they won't like what you are interested in. People hide that from their partner. So it's more of the like showing up as yourself and letting someone know you and what you really care about. I think that that authenticity is actually pretty anxiety inducing. And
Yes.
especially if you track that your partner has very different ideas or expects you to stay in a certain faith or a certain political party or a certain family tradition, because that's pretty risky now to share that with a partner.
Yeah. There's kind of two choices in front of you, in my opinion, when you're at that kind of juncture. You can choose to risk it, and you'll have to figure out a way for you to be okay and to be secure in kind of the reality of what's going to happen if other people might not like what I have to show them or what I kind of claim to really want. And a lot of people will play it safe instead. The risk isn't worth it to have something different or have something better. They'd rather have the safety and the stagnation as opposed to the risk and possible better reward of something different. It's a really difficult choice to choose, but I think we all bump up against that eventually. It's not a matter of if, but when.
Yeah, with what you're talking about, one of the challenges I really see with being authentic is that you can authentically want two different things that don't go together. Like, I really want to be with this person, and I really don't want to face their reaction to what I've been thinking that I have not been sharing with them. Or if I'm going to change what I'm doing in my life, either in our relationship or with my faith or something, I'm really concerned that that may put this at risk. And so it's not, it's part of the challenge is that like you're working out what matters most to you between multiple things that matter a lot.
Yes, and oftentimes you don't quite know how important something is to you until you take a stand, until you kind of meet some of that resistance or that friction with you deciding and being more outspoken about what you are wanting, and then you feeling maybe the pushback that naturally comes from other people, including a close partner. So I think that's a natural process of figuring out what someone wants. And if I never stake a claim of kind of what I want, then I it can be hard for me to figure it out for my own self.
I think, Todd, this is where your own story comes in is such a great example of being authentic. And because you faced your own resistance. Is that okay that we talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
I guess your own resistance is showing up as you. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that, because it wasn't an easy path for you. Um, but I thought maybe our audience could benefit from hearing your story a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a high demand conservative religion. I grew up LDS. Um, and I had kind of tried to navigate and chart my own path. There's a lot of expectation and pressure inside uh, organized religion, especially in the LDS church. And so, pressure and expectation to do certain things, to not do certain things, to act a certain way, to reach milestones at certain points, and if you don't, then there could be some unintended social consequences from doing some of those things. And so it was a lot of me navigating some of this was figuring out how I could still be okay with me and still retain the parts of me that I really was working towards to develop and to retain while navigating through a lot of competing expectations for what other people wanted from me from versus what I wanted for myself.
And I'm curious because I know you found the differentiation concept fairly young. A lot of people don't really start thinking this through in a serious way until midlife, but you got into this in your early 20s. Um, Did that help you with sorting that out for yourself, figuring out how to proceed in that situation?
Yeah, I had I was a missionary back when I was still part of the LDS Church. I was in New Zealand, and I had found a woman named Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, and she put out some of this media talking about some of these differentiation therapy concepts. And as I would listen to some of these things, and I'd find how similar these concepts were to what I was experiencing in a lifetime. And that was really comforting, mostly because I felt that it was really difficult and it was really meaningful and worthwhile. But I also wondered if like I was doing something wrong because I was met with a lot of resistance. I was kind of navigating, and this all felt really difficult. And usually, when something feels difficult, that's when you can sometimes believe that you're doing something wrong, which is not what was going on. It was something really meaningful and important. And this capability building was kind of happening within me. And so, finding some of those concepts and principles early on to kind of match my experience was really helpful, and kind of continued to guide me along this path and encourage me.
Well, that's great. I know her work is based off of Dr. David Schnarch's work, who Catherine and I really pull from his work on differentiation. Um, but I was thinking, Todd, what's something that you did to be authentic to yourself, even though you knew that your community might not like it and might have met you with resistance?
Yeah, so there were probably a couple of things. Um, in the LDS Church, going on a mission can be a pretty transformational part of someone's kind of personality and, emotional, social development. You kind of go at a time when they're analogous to developmental milestones. And so a mission can be pretty important developmentally for a lot of people. I went when I was much older, and that was on purpose because I felt that there were certain things that I didn't want to do or be a part of unless I was really on board. One of those was that I really wanted to be the same person I was before, during, and after I were to come home. I had viewed a lot of people who had gone on a mission and they'd had this really wonderful experience, but they came back changed. And sometimes the change wasn't, in my opinion, wasn't a net benefit. They seemed kind of like a shadow of them, of their former selves, as opposed to maybe a better version. Um, and so I tried really hard to deliberately take the things that I'd spent many years building as part of kind of my internal framework and keep pretty constant about how I was going to act, and that my mission, this important experience, I would kind of let that change me as it would, but not in the stark ways that I didn't approve of, or that I didn't think were congruent or correct or felt right to me. A lot of that can feel somewhat performative, and it was really, really important to me to stay consistent in that, where I was going to change if I wanted to, but I wasn't going to let something change me if I didn't want it to.
So going on your mission older, that's sort of going when you want to, so that's you being true to yourself. Is there anything else in your like that you did that really was being true to yourself, even though you knew you'd probably be met with resistance?
Yeah, I mean, the penultimate challenge was to then no longer be in the church and be gay. The person that I always was, but was scared to fully embrace because of um, various circumstances that the church doesn't smile upon. But to kind of embrace that and and live through that, and has been challenging, but helpful to follow that path of kind of what I am wanting and what I see to be most helpful and correct, as regardless of what other people or organizations may say or have truth claims about.
What you're describing really sounds like that experience of holding on to yourself and having a solid, flexible sense of self, where it doesn't mean that you don't take any influence. You consider influence, like you take in people's perspectives, but you hold on to some type of solidity in yourself about who you are throughout. So I guess like I'm wondering if there's a moment, either from your own life or from a client interaction or something, that stands out as really seeing somebody face that type of a choice to define a self under pressure.
Yeah, I think maybe a year ago, in my own personal relationship, um, I had decided to plan date night for me and my partner Bo, and the date night didn't go as planned because in my ever going quest to become better differentiated, I'm continuing to learn things about myself that are not as flattering to look at or be confronted against. And as date night did not go as I had imagined or planned, um, Bo and I had a really intense conversation where we both were saying things that we had maybe known about each other in the relationship, but we hadn't directly talked about or talked about as honestly as we had. And during that evening, I found out that um, I can be difficult to tell hard things to. It can be, I'm someone who can be disappointed in other people in such a way where they would want to maybe hide things from me. And during that kind of talking about our relationship in this more honest way, I began to see a lot of the truth in what was being conveyed, even though it wasn't flattering to me. And it was really hard to see that and accept the pieces that were true about it, and then to do something about it. I mean, that was that was really difficult, but coming out of that on the other end was extremely valuable and helpful for me as I was trying to better differentiate myself and be able to hold on to myself in a better way, even when I'm kind of facing this unflattering observation about me.
Todd, my reaction to you is of, I guess, two things. One is I have a lot of respect for you because most of us like to come on, into the world like we have it all together. And here you are saying, well, having the conversation about what's not going well for you, where you're negatively impacting your partner. And you're talking about it on our podcast to say, hey, I know, which all of us have, I have some blind spots and some areas where I don't show up from the best in me. And I think, so my reaction is respect that you can actually say that you're solid enough to say that and be okay with that, which I think allows for you to change and be differentiated, because it's not a validating thing when we say that usually out loud, the not so good parts of us. But I think my other reaction is just how brave it is to do that, because that resistance that we get can feel awful. And I'm thinking about when you talk about your church community, maybe there were people who received you coming out or being honest well. But it sounds like, from what I understand, is that there were some that didn't. And it made you question yourself. And so really thinking about, what do you believe? How are you aligning yourself with your values, not someone else's values, not someone else's wants, I think is such a big deal. And it's really the core of differentiation.
Yes, I think that there I think we're all provided with experiences where we are sometimes forced, but it's a more obvious and blatant choice in front of us where we can choose to stake a claim about our life or we can choose to not. And those can happen a lot, but it can be hard to choose to stake a claim and to be more open and transparent about who you are to other people. I think there's it makes a lot of intuitive sense why people would not want to do that. I, I don't, you can meet a lot of resistance and disappointment. People, I think, would be a lot more unhappy with you if you were to continue to stake your claims about what you think and what you believe. It's a natural byproduct of doing that. So it makes sense why we all wouldn't want to do that. But to me, the risk of doing that and to growing into something more capable as a result of brushing up against other people in that way, I think there's something there that's worth taking the risk for.
Yeah, there's this pressure that comes with the openness and the intimacy that like you're describing, and that date experience that you ended up getting a lot of feedback that was pretty hard to take in and valuable.
Yes, it was. Usually date nights are full of, nice, warm feelings and how we tell each other how great the other one is and how solid the relationship is. Whereas I got the exact opposite on all three fronts, right?
Mm-hmm.
How difficult it is to be in a relationship with me personally, how much I can maybe pollute the relationship that I exist in, and how I could be really blind to me doing that in lifetime. And I think that as one becomes more solid, they can take in more of that. They're not so afraid of having others push up against them, and they're not as afraid to push up against other people. In that resistance, in that way that creates positive and productive friction, that I think we all are going to get. It's just a matter of how willing we are to take it in and to embrace the kind of outcomes that will come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Bo was brave too, to tell you those things on a date night. And you were able to hear it. You may not have wanted to hear it, but you were able to hear it. I just think what it did for you guys, right? Because it's not pain for pain's sake. It was, I mean, you guys had deeper connection, it sounds like. It was real. You dealt with some things. You saw each other and you were honest. And I'm thinking about why do this? Because it is hard. And I think it sounds like for you, it helped your relationship to become something more real and better.
Yeah, I think as I look back on my life and forward what I want, I think it'd be immensely disappointing to kind of be 80 years old and realize how much opportunity I hadn't claimed, and wanting to kind of be more engaged and more actively um, engaged in this process of trying to figure out who I am and what my blind spots are. That self development that can happen on your own, but is, from my experience and what I see in my couples, it's going to happen in your relationship regardless of who you're with. You're going to be faced with your own limitations, and when that happens, how are you going to respond? It's a big choice and opportunity, and I think it's easy to think we'd want to take that opportunity, when really it requires a lot from us. So I think there's a lot of courage in taking the risk and moving out of comfort, because maybe comfort is more illusionary than we think.
One of the things that really drew me to this approach is that long-term perspective of this could get better with time, because a lot of relationship modalities, they kind of focus on the idea of like recapture that early spark, go back, remind yourself of what things were like in the beginning. But for quite a few couples, where things were at the start isn't actually something that they would continue to want for their whole life, because they got together young, they were immature. It's not necessarily that was even that great that they want it back. It's like they're trying to figure out, how can I have something better than what was modeled for me, something better than what I ever experienced, and like, how could I end up deeper in love in my 60s or 70s than I was in my 20s? Like, to me, that's the dream. Where I'm like, I want something that grows over time. I don't want something that is fading and the vitality is seeping out of it over time. And so I've loved the aliveness in this perspective, that if you're willing to be honest, be open, and take in feedback from your partner who's got a front row seat on you and who you are and what it's like to be close to you and how it's not that nice sometimes, you can continue to expand your capacity for a close, warm connection.
Yeah. And I think that people maybe are wanting to keep that early on spark, or, the spark of what happened at the beginning of their relationship. They want to keep that on because to them, that's the only sustainable thing that they've kind of seen. It's the way things have been. We know it works. So we just need to keep doing that same thing, which will eventually, in my opinion, lead to stagnation. And that's why growing out of this first stage of the relationship to onto something deeper and scarier and more intimate. We're closer. We see each other more clearly, and I see myself more clearly. That's that's a scary prospect, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I see in terms of my own relationship, when my husband is being his authentic self, it's like he's there. He's a person, and I see him, and um that's feels good, and it's different than someone who's trying to perform or trying to get me to approve of them. And then on the other hand, when he's real with me about my own blind spots, I may not want to hear that. In fact, I don't want to hear it really, but there's a part of me that does. And then when he lets me know what he's really seeing and when he means well, um, respect him for it. It's like, oh, you saw that in me. You want something, you want our relationship to go better, and you're being honest about it versus holding on to it and being resentful, towards me and wishing I would just change. So I really do think there's a respect in it. And I think you respected Bo. It sounds like, because you were willing to hear it. So I do think that both sides benefit from that authenticity, even when something brought up is unflattering.
Yeah, I think to speak more openly and honestly about what it's like to be in a relationship and how it's not fun and how the other person probably annoys you quite a lot, even though we don't say those words out loud. I think we all know that to be a true experience. And I think talking about that more openly helps set the stage for us to engage with our relationships in a more honest way. I don't expect that this person will do it all for me. I'm gonna let go of that expectation because I don't know how much it serves me. And instead I'm gonna see this person and engage with them with exactly who they are. And they will probably do the same with me. And that's how you build a more solid self and a more solid relationship at the same time.
You need good data if you're going to build a solid self. And one of the things Dr. Schnarch would say is that you can be right about your partner and wrong about yourself. And that's just about how brains work, that it's much easier for us to track another person than to track ourselves. And so if you want to grow as a person, you want to really know who you are and show up in a good way, it's actually incredibly valuable if you can get critical feedback from your partner. It's really nice if they're not mean about it, but
Yes.
it's extremely valuable. And having a framework that helps you relate to it that way of, I'm actually being offered something helpful and good here. It can take some of the sting out of it, even though it's always challenging.
Yes. And I feel like that's such a pivotal part of learning how to kind of calm yourself down and settle yourself in those exact moments where I can hear what's being said to me in the way that it is really intended. That this person is trying to tell me something really important, and it would do me well to listen really carefully and to not kind of jump to my own defense, because this isn't about picking sides. This is about me getting more clear about me. And this person is probably going to help me better understand that and how willing I am in that space to kind of be receptive to that feedback, and what they're seeing will helped me
Yeah.
incredibly.
Yeah, I was thinking about authenticity. Dr. Schnarch also talks about it doesn't mean we just do whatever the hell we want. Or authenticity isn't about, let me just do what comes naturally to me. Because naturally what comes to me could be to sit on the couch and do nothing. It's not about what comes naturally. Sometimes we have to work at showing up better. But it's really about being true to our values, who we are. And then the tough part is, can we reveal that about ourselves to someone else, knowing that there could be invalidation? But we've talked today about some reasons why we would do that. We have a better relationship. We respect someone for addressing an issue with us when they do it well. We respect somebody for being honest about what they care about, even if it doesn't match with what we're saying, because they're not hiding from us. And there's more connection when someone is authentic, versus somebody who's performing and trying to get your approval, which is, something that now we have to reinforce that they are good versus just appreciating who they are and accepting who they are. So I've really appreciated our conversation with you, Todd. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspective with your clients. Before you finish up, where can people find you?
I am in the Utah County area, so I cover Lehigh and Orem. I have two different practices I work at, or you can find me on Psychology Today by typing my name, Todd Bean. I work mostly with couples, but I also see individuals as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
We're glad for our listeners who joined us for Differentiated Love and Sex podcast today. And we look forward to having more conversations and having you join next week. Thank you, Todd.